What's up, everyone? You're listening to Hey Man, the advice podcast for men. I'm Avi Klein.
I'm Sam Graham-Felsen.
I'm a therapist. Sam's a novelist. Each week, we're joined by a special guest to answer your questions and hopefully get a few of our own questions answered as well. Our guest this week is Adam Linehan. Adam is a writer and a veteran. Adam served in the U.S. Army as a combat medic in Iraq and Afghanistan from 2006 to 2012, and he recently published an essay in the New York Times about his struggle with survivor's guilt. We talked to him about that in depth, and he also helps us answer a question from a man who's struggling with some unhealthy behaviors when his girlfriend goes out of town. Enjoy.
You went in after the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan. So you went in the middle of the violence. So you knew going in that this was not going to be a picnic. Mm-hmm. So can you just take us back a little bit to the kind of mental state you were in when you got to basic training, and just I mean, what are you thinking, girding yourself for what's to come? Are you trying not to think about it? Are you psyching yourself up to think about all of the possibilities? What was it like?
I mean, there's no way to kind of imagine what the Army is like unless you've been in the Army. I'm not saying you guys can't understand what I'm talking about, but it's just it wasn't anything like I thought it was going to be. There's
no precedent for it. Is that kind of what
there's no precedent in civilian society. Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's a great way to put it. And so, going in, I had kind of a romantic understanding of all of this stuff, and I, thought, well, look at the statistics, it's worth the gamble, right? I'm probably not going to die, and I'm probably not going to get wounded. And but there's a chance that I could come out of this a better person, and I can kind of start to actually pursue the things that I want to pursue in life. And, the closer I got to, the shit, I guess, mm-hmm. There's a lot of phases of realizations, first, basic training, you realize America isn't, I only saw one little tiny piece of America, mm-hmm. And you have people from all walks of life who come into the Army, and in 2006, for a lot of people were running from stuff. Mm. There was that go to war, go to jail thing going on, You had a lot of misfits. You had a lot of, there was one kid who he was from the Bronx, this Bangladeshi kid. And he said, I'm going to the deli, and he just went, and the recruiter picked him up, and he called on the first day. They give you a 30-second phone call to tell his parents that that he had come to the Army.
Wow.
Yeah. So, so that was the first big realization, and, Iraq. I went to Iraq. I worked in a prison. I wasn't scared, going to that deployment. I was never scared on that deployment. It was an eye opener in terms of wow, this is how our government does business. It was, just a really, the notion of basically doing mass arrest of any, of fighting age males, mm-hmm. A lot of times without any evidence, and putting them in these camps to indoctrinate them was what we were there to do. Mm. And, but then when I got to Afghanistan with the infantry, and I had volunteered for that deployment, and
why'd you do that? Were you hungering for something more, or what were?
I realized that I had gotten myself into basically a situation. Was my thinking back then, that I had joined the Army during a time of war, and if I didn't actually go to war, it was gonna ride me for the rest of my life. Mm. And I know veterans who struggle with that, mm-hmm. It's a real thing. And so I was I have to do this. And I just still didn't know, what I was getting myself into. And as we were leapfrogging into Kandahar in 2010, we were going very rural place. And, it was the flight into Kandahar Air Force Base, and then the briefings, and them telling you how these are all the different types of IEDs that are out there. We ran into the unit one of the units that was coming out of there at the airfield and this guy just being like, man, y'all are going to lose people. Yeah. And I mean, just getting increasingly more scared. And, you know, that's like, I think when this is one of the most fucked up things that I have ever done. I called my mom and I just said, I'm so scared. I'm sorry that I did this. And that just freaked my mom out.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked another time for the deployment. I mean, it was, you know, that must have been really traumatic for her. And you know, then we get on helicopters and we go to this one base and like, we're like, you know, like flying in and the door gunner just like starts opening up with this 50 cal. I'm like, whoa, what's this? I don't know what he was shooting. He might've just been doing test fires or something, but I was just like so fucking scared. And then they were like building up this fob and woke up in the morning and there was just a massive firefight like between the Taliban and the Afghan army happening like right outside these like HESCO barriers. And, you know, there was like a mass casualty and, you know, situation, a bunch of civilians got caught in the crossfire. And then they're like, yeah, so like today we're like driving out there and we're like going to the outpost like that we're taking over. We get, you know, I mean, I'm just like, whip, this is when I die by 90. Sorry. I went on.
No. So just to like freeze frame for a second, like when you're feeling that fear, right? Like I'm just trying to imagine, like if somebody told me that when I get on the Q train to go home today, there's like, I don't know, even like a 1% chance that a bomb will go off on the train. Like
my body would be racked.
Yeah, I just feel like I wouldn't be able to breathe and just like even a 1% chance. I mean, think about how much of Americans are driven by fear of like their house getting broken into when that's like a 1 in a million chance or whatever, right? And how scared they are of that. So you're being told by a guy like you're going to lose people. You're going to lose people.
Yeah.
How do people fall asleep? Like how do you function with that fear, or were there techniques you just
I mean it was I mean I had never felt kind of feared like that. I had never, and it was really intense, you know, for the first week, I would say, you know, first week. And as we were getting closer and closer, you know, then we get to this outpost and there's this Afghan soldier just blasting this dishka into the neighboring village. And they're like, yeah, he does this like every evening at 5 p.m. And, you know, the guys we replaced had gone like totally like native. They had beards and cut off their sleeves. They were juicing. They were like, they were like hardcore, and they like were doing this thing, you know, movement to contact, which is this tactic where you just go look for a fight.
Okay.
You know, so that's where the insurgents are, you know, we drew fire and then now we know where they're hiding out. So they did a lot of movement to contact, and they were like, if you guys came to like party, you know, this is the place. And that was really freaked me out.
Yeah. What is that like when other people are super gung ho about it?
You get gung ho.
You do.
Oh man. I mean, that's like a big part, I think, kind of the guilt for me, at least. Like you know, once the boredom sets in and it is boring, you know, when the army is boring, it is like next level, supernaturally boring.
You got to explain that. I mean, you'd think that would be a relief, but
oh man, no. I mean, the first day in the army, when you know, they don't tell you have to wait for like sometimes like 2-3 weeks just to and the in processing station to start basic training. So you think you're going to get off the ground running, and they just have you standing in formation for all day. Just waiting in line and just in a formation. And then that becomes a line to get chow. Then you're back in the formation and people are just yelling at you and you're just staring at the walls, you know, like, and so in Afghanistan, like there's a lot of bugs. There's a lot of things that just like boredom isn't like comfortable, right? The way it was hot, you know, and eventually like I started to just be like, man, I want to like get this going, you know, and it just kind of like slowly escalated, you know. There was, you know, we'd have, you know, like it started off with like snipers and IEDs and stuff like that. Yeah. And when you know, then just they took their time getting to know how we operated versus how the unit before us operated.
Got it.
I'm curious, like, what the culture was among the guys, like, in terms of admitting that you were scared. I mean, you have this really powerful moment in your piece, which I want to dive into, where one of your fellow soldiers tells you how scared he is when you're lying on the floor. But was there like a culture of like, do not admit that you're scared, do not complain? Like, was there like, you're a bitch if you complain kind of thing, or was it more common than you might think?
Everyone was pretty open, I think, with their fear. Soldiers complain a lot, but that's when you're going to get in some dicey territory. I mean, I remember one of my squad leaders, because I jumped around squad. This guy I still look up to. I mean, I think he's like one of the coolest people I've ever met. Just a real fucking solid dude, just like came up from nothing and just was just like turned into like an incredible person, and everyone looked up to him, and I was up in the guard tower one day, and it started pouring rain. Very rare that it rains over there. And I asked someone, "Can y'all put my rucksack under like a poncho or something?" And no one did. And I went in, and we slept in the field. I had to sleep I'm going to be sleeping in a wet sleeping bag for like the next week. Like, you guys just fucked me over, and I'm just so pissed off, and I'm like in the tent, and I'm just going off, and I just heard, "Hey, Doc." And I was like, fuck, man. And I turned around as this squad leader, and he was like, "You bitched more than any fucking grown man that I've ever fucking known." And he was like ready to throw down, and I'm like, "Nope, I'm out of this tent." Like, it was really kind of humiliating moment for me.
Yeah.
And also it hurt because we were really close.
Yeah.
But I appreciated that. Like, I now don't really like people who complain. And I think like, soldiers keep each other in check as long as you're genuine, as long as you are who, you purport yourself to be, you'll be fine. And, bullying is a thing that happens in certain platoons, and, it did happen in our platoon, but, in terms of, having to be really courageous. I mean, towards the end of the deployment, like, even our NCOs were like, "We don't want to go on patrol anymore." Like, trying to like, going to the lieutenant being like, "This is fucking stupid. There's no point. Like, why are we going out there and risking our lives for this shit? Like, let's just not go."
Yeah.
So I think we were pretty open with the fear. Yeah. Very honest environment. In an infantry platoon, there's no secrets in an infantry platoon, especially when you're deployed.
So the worst fear came true for you, obviously. And you wrote about it in the piece. And can you just tell us what happened?
Yeah. So, we were, trying to think to kind of put this in the context. So like snipers and IEDs were like became an escalating problem where we were. At one point, my friend killed this guy who turned out to be the son of the village elder of the village next door to our first outpost. And we kind of lost his blessing at that point, and things started to kind of escalate, and guys started to get hurt, within our company. And, there was like convoys were just getting blown up, like right outside of our outpost, pretty like consistently. And, but you develop a routine for like, okay, you look at the ground, and when you're walking, when you're patrolling, you keep an eye out for IEDs, and as soon as the bullets start to fly, you react, and you react to contact, and that was kind of the rhythm that we got into. And one day we were just kind of having one of those days, and took some sniper fire and stuff, and that's what I talk about in the essay is kind of, I remember I was behind this wall, and this machine gun team, it's a 2-man machine gun team, and they were both standing up, and I'm like, just get get down. Cause as a medic, like, I don't want to treat you guys like, and they were just like, no, doc, you're being a pussy. And they're just like standing up there. And I'm like, okay, yeah, maybe I am. And I stood up, and as soon as I did, this bullet, I mean, it was so close that like my mind visualized the bullet, like, and in between my head and this, this soldier's named Jake, his head, and we both hit the ground, and he looked at me and just very, very earnestly, said, I'm afraid to die. Like, don't let me die. Or no, he didn't say, don't let me die. He said, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
It wasn't, don't let me die.
Did you hear it like that? Like, did you feel responsible?
Oh yeah. I heard it as don't let me die.
Yeah.
And,
that's a heavy thing.
It was a heavy thing, man. And that really, and so, kind of an hour later, we are all walking back to our outpost, and I had been with those guys, and I split off to go smoke a cigarette with a friend of mine who was further up in the formation, and then like lit the cigarette, and there was just like this massive explosion behind us. And I jumped, I thought it was an RPG or something. And I looked in this field, there was this big gray dome of smoke over this field where, the rest of our platoon was. And, when an IED blows up, the shockwave goes straight up, it's like in a hole. So it shoots straight up, and it has like this leaves like an exclamation mark up in the air, and this was like something different, because when a suicide bomber goes off, it's wrapped around them. This guy had grenades and ball bearings like all over his body. And so it's meant to the shockwave to go out.
Yeah.
And I had never even thought about that. And at what level, right? An IED hits you from beneath, this one strikes you fairly straight on. And me and our RTO ran towards the smoke, and there was this like little wadi, it's like these like, they have like this like irrigation system, it's like all of these like creeks, I guess, but they're usually dry. And we got to the edge of the wadi, and on the other side was the field, and I just heard our RTO, who's a friend of mine, just start vomiting.
Wow.
And it was, I had never imagined that that life could just look so horrific. And there was a lot of emotions running high. The Afghan soldiers were shooting their guns in the air. And, at one point, someone picked up the leg of the suicide bomber, because there was just these two legs, like still wearing the sandals there, and threw it like as hard as he could. And he was like, fuck everyone in this country, and like, that's how everyone was. But I was like, as a medic, like, you just got to do your job. And so I was just, trying to just get everyone to calm down, and like, let's just focus on this. Like, someone accidentally shot one of the casualties at one point. Like, it was a mess. And
were you by yourself? Like, or was there another medic with you? Or
I was, for the first maybe 7 minutes or something, it was me, 7 to 10 minutes. And then my buddy showed up, because they were at this outpost. They just ran, and when it was just me, I was really overwhelmed, and I didn't, because it was the injuries of the guys who survived were quite complex, especially one in particular. And I didn't realize it was a suicide bomber, like even at the legs and all of this. And no one could. And then my buddy, who was wounded, he told me, what had happened as I was bandaging him up.
Wow.
And it was heavy. And and I saw that kid who, I say kid, but he's a man, who had said that he didn't want to die. And I had this really, really profound kind of, and the only way that I can describe it is like, it was like I didn't see God, but I like felt God. And I like remember looking at the sky, And there's just this very kind of clear message being communicated to me that like, you did this. Like you, this was exactly what you wanted. Here it is, you know? And like, I carried that until a year ago.
Wow.
I started to really, you know, be like, what, wait, how? And then like, you know, everyone was very distraught, obviously. And I was completely numb. And I thought, well, of course, here's evidence that I don't feel, you know, but I was the medic. I had to keep it under wraps, you know?
Yeah, of course.
And
I'm just curious, sorry to interrupt, but like, you've gone over this so many times. But like, what is it like talking to us about it? Like how is it to talk about it?
This is like, it's strange. I mean, the reason I'm comfortable being here is because, or doing this is like, first I've spoken with the mother of the soldier that I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I have heard from many members of my platoon since this essay published, and they were all extremely supportive. Like, we got your back, you know?
I'm so glad.
And they, you know, it rang true. I was so scared about that. And because this is a personal story for all of us.
Yeah.
And it was just something like that. I just like, you know, but I think we got to talk about this kind of stuff, because this is what the war was. This is what you send soldiers to do. And it's usually not glorious.
Well, that's what you said like a little while ago, like there's, I'm not good on my army lingo, but you said there are no secrets like in an
infantry platoon.
In an infantry platoon. And so much of your piece is about secrecy in a way, like what's secret, what's not, what can you talk about? What do you need to pretend like didn't happen?
Yeah.
That seems like that's the heart of it.
Yeah.
You know what
that is really, it's a breakdown in communication, and there is a serious breakdown in communication right now in the military and civilians. Look at military bases, what they've become since Vietnam, these towns,
right?
You know, they have, you know,
they're their own worlds.
They're like Native American reservations, you know, they're like repositories of guilt. You know, they've just become, they're more ruralized, and like they're more contained, and like they don't really have much interaction with the civilian population. And look at Iraq and Afghanistan. That lesson was already learned in Vietnam. And, you know, who we didn't listen to? The Vietnam veterans. And that's Republicans and Democrats. You know, I've interviewed many Vietnam veterans, and it was not just the liberals. It was both sides. Both sides had a really kind of unrealistic notion of what was going on, and they rejected the truth. And they isolated the Vietnam veteran in the truth. And he suffered immensely for it. There has never been a Vietnam veteran president, and there never will be. We have a draft dodger as a president, and that is, I mean, that makes complete sense to me, because of course the smarter person wouldn't have gone to Vietnam, right? If you went to Vietnam, then you were a sucker. Why didn't you get a deferment? Why didn't you get a doctor to write you a note?
Yeah,
you know, and I respect the hell out of Vietnam veterans. You know, particularly the ones who were able to kind of triumph. That is a really hard road.
Yeah.
If you ever have like 30 minutes, go watch on cspan.com or whatever, the video of the dedication ceremony in I think it's 1982 for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall. It's really extremely powerful. You know, you have like guys still in uniform, you know, coming out of the woodworks. Like they had never, you know, they still haven't come home. They're still living like they're out in the boonies, you know, and it's like, and you just have like this, like really, you know, you have like working class people and businessmen, and, you know, and they all come together, and the speeches are just so powerful. And Jan Scruggs, man, I have so much respect for that guy, you know.
Can you explain, actually, in the you interview Scruggs, who was behind the push to get the wall created, and he makes, I mean, there's this, I actually didn't know that was the reason why the names on the wall are arranged the way they are. Can you talk about that decision and why that's so meaningful for veterans?
Yeah, so Jan Scruggs, he had a master's degree in psychology, and so when the idea of the memorial was that this was going to be something that would help heal, the Vietnam veterans, and so he went into it with that attitude, and he was like a big, a devoted reader of Carl Jung, and really believed in this notion that the hero's journey isn't complete until he's like come home and managed to integrate everything that he all of the knowledge and stuff that he accumulated on his journey in the unknown, and integrate it into his life, his normal life. He arranged the names by date of casualty as opposed to alphabetical order. So if it was alphabetical, it would have been much easier to find these things. But he wanted the names to be grouped together so soldiers who had been in had witnessed mass casualty incidents, had survived mass casualty incidents, would be taken back to that moment.
Yeah.
And see those names that superimposed over his reflection.
Yeah.
And remember how easy it could have been for him to be up there and acknowledge it and address it, because that really, and when I started to get into Carl Jung and all of this and like being like, you have to face that. That's the dragon, you have to face like your mortality and your limitations as an individual and as a human being, and because ever since I got back, I mean, it's like, I in retrospect, I realized like I ran away from like everyone that I loved. Like I left town. I went home to Austin. I finished my degree, and I came immediately to New York, and I created a lot of distance between myself and the people who I cared about, because I just couldn't bear the thought of like being close to people and seeing them die and losing them. And, in my relationship, that was that was an issue too, because I just would be like, I don't want
Closer you
this
get,
person.
the scarier it is.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I ask you this? I don't know if this is like.
Did I answer the question, by the way?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Right,
and more so.
okay.
I don't know. I don't know if this is a fucked up idea or accurate, but it almost seems like the hard thing to admit in a way is like feeling glad that it wasn't you.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. Yep. Oh, for sure. I mean, I remember that was the first thing I thought, and this wasn't the only time I saw people get killed over there. Veterans, I've come across research that says research from World War II that was conducted during World War II that found that like soldiers would home in on one specific experience that would kind of summarize, the war, the trauma, all of the trauma, So for me, it really, it was this moment. God, what was I'm so sorry. Can we edit that out? What was the question again?
I just asked if part of it is about being glad that it wasn't you, being glad that you're still alive.
Yeah. So yeah. That's a big part of it. And I remember, with that incident, the suicide bombing and a few other incidents, my first thought every time was, thank God it wasn't me. Mm-hmm. And holy shit, I could have been one of those bodies. Yeah. And, one of the last things I did as a medic over there, was like this guy in our unit, he knelt on a landmine up on the top of this like sandy hill. And I remember just like getting up to the top of this hill. I had to run up this hill and just like them being like, this is like a minefield right here. And his leg was blown off and he was just like, Doc, and I remember being like, this is it. I'm gonna
die.
This is it. Yeah, like my luck's run up, and but yeah, he survived, and I was super shaken up by that. Just these moments. Even like early on in the deployment, I fell down a well, and that was, completely
Holy
like,
shit.
me and my buddy just went through the earth, and it was like the earth had swallowed me up intentionally. It felt like, and I remember like as this barrel fell underneath us and basically clogged the hole. And as we were, starting to get out, the walls started to cave in, and just being like, man, wow, this is how I die.
Yeah.
This is like a way that I could die. And just being like, what a joke my life was. What am I doing here?
Mm-hmm.
Why did I like go against all of the advice that had been ignored all of the red flags, and no one's going to ever be able to make sense of this. My parents are never going to be able to make sense of this. And I remember thinking, all I want is someone to tell them the truth of what happened, because I didn't want them to be consumed by the fantasy that had ended my life in that moment. And this was like, my life flashing before my eyes kind of moment.
Yeah.
And it lasted a little bit longer than, when a bullet whizzes by your head or something,
Right.
that was like, but I remember that, and that stuck with me in a big way. And I've maybe, I would say just as much as anything else that happened over there, that was combat related. This wasn't, but so I have tremendous, I don't really, when people say I can't imagine what you've been through and stuff, I'm like, I don't know. I mean, have you ever feared for your life in any situation? Have you ever been in a car accident or whatever,
Right.
Have you ever seen death? Have you ever lost a parent? Like all the messages, there's all, the same message is being conveyed here.
Yeah.
Like life is brutal.
That phrase, I can't imagine. I actually think that's a horrible phrase.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like, you know what? Just try to imagine it, and guess what? If someone reads your piece, they can imagine it. And that's
awesome.
the power of writing. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
the power of description. And that's the power of talking about this shit.
Yeah.
It gives us the ability to try to imagine it. And I just want to say, like, we haven't talked directly, about kind of what's at the heart of his piece. And I just encourage our listeners to read the piece.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right away. I mean, it's such a powerful piece, but I think one of the things that is just new about it that I hadn't seen was, that it's about survivor's guilt, and even, PTSD is taboo for, I guess, a lot of veterans to acknowledge in themselves. It's become way less taboo, obviously, because there's a huge crisis around veteran suicides. But I think, I imagine survivor's guilt is totally rampant, and the fact that you wrote about this is going to make it less taboo. And just as a small, and I think I think, and you got to get at this in your essay, but I think it's taboo in part because it seems like, what the fuck is survivor's guilt? You know what I mean? Like what really, like you're complaining that you didn't die. But I just want to say, like, my grandfather and grandmother, escaped the Nazis. There were Jews in Germany. And I think survivor's guilt killed my grandmother. She committed suicide. And my grandfather lived in, a mental prison his entire
Like
life.
a joyless life.
I mean, I think he accessed a tiny bit of joy towards the end of his life, but he didn't have what your grandfather had, which was resorting to drinking, and he had workaholism. He just poured everything into his work and just felt this endless sense of, like, I shouldn't be alive. I have to kind of earn every second, and there's no space for joy or gratitude or just a feeling of, like, gladness of being of not having been killed in the Holocaust like his sister was. And thinking about just the guilt issues, like, he was really smart. He got really fucking good grades. As a result of getting a perfect report card, he got one of those visas that said, this kid's really smart. He'll like make a lot of money in America and be a great guy in America. So they let him in, and his sister didn't get one of those. And I imagine that was a big part of that that guilt. But anyway, just
that's incredible, man.
But it's I just was really moved by the piece, and I think it's really important. I just want to thank you for writing it.
No, yeah, thanks. Like I'm so glad that it's resonated with people that, for me, it would have been an utter failure if, first and foremost, if it didn't resonate with veterans. That was like why I took a lot of painstaking effort to make sure that I was describing my own experience as accurately as possible. And Lauren at, the New York Times Magazine, Lauren Katzenberg, she does the At War section, was good about kind of keeping me to that task and being like, is this like the most, honest explanation of what's going on with you? And so it had to resonate with veterans, and but it also had to resonate with civilians, because what I wanted to show is that this is a problem for us all.
Yeah.
Like, look at this country. This country was, after World War II, the America that we know was built by a bunch of survivors. They came home from this war and they just got to work, and they pumped out a lot of kids, like people with survivor guilt. That's a common, I can't say common thing, but it's just, I've seen, in the research, this is like a trend that's been observed. They worked really hard. They partied really, really hard. And this is the country they built.
Right. We're like living with
it.
Yeah. My wife just sort of said that to me, like offhand one day, like, I don't know, we talk about masculinity a lot because that's my thing. And she was just like, you think about like all of the generations of men in this country and how many served, right? And our notions of what it means to be a man, how much of it is informed by veterans and by survivors. And we really think about that when we look to our fathers and to our grandfathers about how we should be, and I just think about like what they're holding, whether it's hard to show love or whether it's an insistence on work, like on pouring yourself into your work, that like it infiltrates, it infiltrates our whole culture. Absolutely.
I mean, I think that we would really benefit from a realistic understanding of, World War II and its repercussions, because there's a lot of nostalgia around World War II, like the armies, got back to these throwback, uniforms, the pink and greens, dress uniforms and stuff like that. And it's like, I mean, they were heroes, the people who fought in that war, and, our guys, our side. And, but the people they came home to be should probably not be models of human behavior for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Because they were dealing with some serious shit. And and so we look up to them, and we look, but we're, there's certain aspects of them that we're admiring that is coming from a really kind of broken place.
Yeah.
In this real laconic, just keep your head down and, get to work and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's that's a kind of a bleak existence,
I mean, you've actually read the research, but I'm just pop psychologizing, but it's amazing to think about how that World War II generation probably created a huge amount of the epidemic we have of men just not ever being able to talk about their feelings, I mean, that must be a huge part of,
I can't imagine it started there, but I'm just thinking about how many wars have preceded that too, but
I mean, but then just the size of this one and the economic ramifications of it and stuff like that.
Yeah, I hear you.
I mean, think about this. There was the biggest war in human history. It just happened, and we act like we're out of its shadow.
Yeah.
It's, in my opinion, the war never ended. It just was dispersed,
right?
And
it's the past is not past, right?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, Einstein, he predicted, we nuked, and this has to be fact checked too, but it's been a while since
I
read
our team
this.
on that.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so Einstein probably he said his regret was recommending the use of the development of the atom bomb. He was meant that to be specifically for Germany in case like Germany was actually going to hit us, right? We need this. It's us or them. But he was very critical of the use on Japan because he said you did that to just scare Russia, and you just traumatized the world. And there's just going to be these like preventative wars, to like in countries searching for weapons of mass destruction until there's like the next war. And then that war is going to be like, and he goes, I don't know what World War III is going to be fought with, but World War IV is going to be fought with sticks and stones.
Yeah, that's a good one. Einstein's got a lot of good quotes. This feels like almost just a second piece from the conversation, but we've got an advice question for you, so we'll see if you can help us out. Hey man, I've started to notice a habit that I've slipped into that is worrying me. My girlfriend and I live together and she travels semi-regularly for her job. When she's away, I tend to do the same thing every time. I smoke some weed, play video games, and order way too much food on Seamless. I might do this for a day or two, and then I feel totally gross and disgusting. The food in particular stresses me out. I feel remorseful and regret it, and I think about it during the week. I feel like I have to make up for it for the rest of that week or month by eating really healthy, but then that almost fuels the desire to get stoned and get takeout again, as if I've somehow earned it by being really good. I know a lot of guy friends who do something similar when their girlfriends go out of town, but I really feel guilty about this. She doesn't know or has never mentioned it to me, and I wouldn't want her to know. What should I do? Signed, Munchies in Midtown.
So Munchies in Midtown is me.
Oh, yeah. You can relate to that. I can relate to it, too.
Yeah, man. God.
I mean, I don't... I definitely can relate to... I want to get into, like, stuff with food, but definitely... Like, I would just like to... it is kind of a... Maybe not quite universal, but I'm speculating, Sam, that you can identify it, too. Like, if your wife or girlfriend goes out of town, like, you just, like... You go to seed or something like that.
God.
Like, I don't understand really why I do it, but
also, oh my God. Yeah. I mean, my wife, I always like joke with her about this. She has no vices. Like she's not a Puritan who's like uptight or anything. She's actually a pretty chill person. She's one of Avi's oldest friends. You can attest to this.
Yeah.
She just doesn't have vices. So like, I don't have like a partner to get stoned with or to drink with or whatever. And it's funny, like, I mean, now I have kids, so I can't do this. And usually when she's away, like I'm with the kids, so I just can't do this anymore. But anytime before she had kids, anytime she would go away, I'd like literally plan the menu in my head. I'm like, first I'm gonna get this, and like on that show, Louis, like when he does the bang bang, he goes to like the diner and the sushi place or the Indian place and the pizza place. I'd like order like a bang bang, order like cinnamon bun, like the just gross as shit.
Yeah.
And just like get stoned and eat until I was like unconscious with eating.
Yeah, man.
You see yourself in this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. And then I'd spend like the last day, before she got home, just cleaning the shit out of the apartment, erasing all the evidence, you know?
Yeah. I'm trying to really, like, even just for myself, try and unpack. I'm not at, like, I can be disciplined about some things, but then other things I can't. And it's like, I don't know why I've never learned this lesson because it doesn't feel particularly good to me.
You're talking about eating in specific, like overeating or?
Well, like definitely like I joke with my wife because like on a quarterly basis, I will like go out by myself to Chinese food and then feel like sickened by what I ate. And it's like, how have I not put it together at this point that I should just stop? But
well, you indulge your bad habits. You indulge the things that you have to kind of relinquish in order for or put on pause in order for a relationship to work out.
I guess that's true. Yeah. You know? Like you feel like I can't really be that person and have this relationship.
Yeah. And I think it's such, I mean, I'm trying to think about this, like what am I actually feeling when I do that stuff? It's almost like, it's like a break from like having to perform on like a level of like morality and responsibility all the time. And like, it's, and like, but almost like that's funny to think about it that way. It's like it's a performance to just be behaving normally and moderately so that you can function well in a relationship.
Yeah.
I'm laughing
and then the
it's
second
true
she's
and-
out of there, I'm like, all right, back to the fucking
But
I think that's and he gets at that in this question, like talking about how he like how he then he's like goes back to being super abstemious as though he deserves
yeah,
to
man.
yeah.
I mean, I don't know if with drinking, something that I, really I do a lot. And with so in the piece, I talk about basically my relationship ending. So like that's where I am like right now.
Yeah.
And I'm like living out of my backpack. So,
Mhm.
but when, it was an issue in the relationship for sure. And, there were a lot of things that, I kept down because of the drinking, but when she would sometimes like, I went down from like 8 beers a night to 2. And for me, and I was going for 0, and, I stayed at that 2 for a long time. And some nights, she'd say, just don't drink tonight, and, I would not be able to sleep usually. And the next day I would go, to the liquor store and get a little flask of, whiskey and something and just drink that on top of those 2 beers,
But
and
hiding it from her. Right?
And hiding it from her.
Yeah.
And I would really, I would get drunk the next day and very, very, well, she's going to listen to this and she doesn't know that. So, but yeah, I don't know if it's the best kind of approach to life, this like.
Which part? Or like it to me, I'm hearing it's like one of the things that
I earned that because what he's saying is like, I earn, he said, I'll be good. And
so
now I'm going to be
deserve
bad.
it. Yeah.
And, I think maybe as a society, we live in this kind of, that's our mentality. Mm-hmm. That's the rhythm of our life. Oh, thank God it's Friday, and then it's just like get bombed, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think like we're just kind of in the habit of like, we're constantly indulge and then we are hungover.
Yeah.
And we're like full of regret and like guilt. And, I don't know when that started. Maybe that started after World War II,
Let's blame it all on the boomers.
Like the guilt of like, you care. I mean, so I think like maybe that's the way that I can really relate to it. But yeah, I mean, I would never feel guilty no, I guess I would. I mean, I'd feel like a piece of crap if I was eating seamless and stuff like that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, so one is like the attitude of like, I earned it. And also like, part of that is like putting yourself through, like beating yourself up over what you did. Cause maybe there's like a more compassionate way. Like if like, I don't know, when I was listening to you, Sam, talk about it, like I remember like for some reason it's really Chinese food for me. Cause it makes me feel like a kid. I don't know. It's like always been, cause I'm Jewish too. And like, it's like, that has like a lot of connotations. It's like comfort food. And so like to like slip into that mode, like, oh, I can have that again. Like it's nice. Like you don't have to, it seems harsh to have to choose. Like I have to be one way or another. Like you got both, you can have more than one side to you. And like, maybe it's okay to have the side that wants to.
Unless maybe you're a straight up addict, in which case you can't really have both sides.
Well, I do like what I worry about with this guy is that if you keep feeling guilty and like it's something that you did wrong, then you're gonna hide it, and then you're gonna like
that.
Then you're gonna like it's gonna fuel addict behavior. I think you know what I mean.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, so what he's talking about is guilt. He feels guilty for doing this, and he's hiding something from his spouse.
Yeah, and he doesn't, and he's not okay with it himself. Right?
Yeah, and I think like that's problematic. I mean, I don't think it's problematic that he does this, where he indulges himself, because literally every guy I know does that.
Yeah,
I think that it's problematic that he is carrying that guilt around, because guilt is so destructive.
Yeah,
you punish yourself for it in ways that maybe you don't realize. You're tolerance for like, you'll let people you'll let the world beat you up a little bit more. The more guilty you feel, the more you deserve, punishment.
Right. And he's like punishing himself.
Yeah. And I think like, and it's, it drains your confidence. It gives you a lack of moral clarity. And
how do you mean? Like, tell me what you mean. That seems like a good, I'm curious about that.
Your ability to say this is right and this is wrong.
Right.
Because
who am I?
Yeah. Who am I to say?
Yeah.
And I've noticed that a lot of in my life incidences overseas and also here, when I was able to act the most decisively and gracefully was when I had that perfect moral clarity. And so like, I'm not saying we can all live with that moral clarity, but it is a better way of being, if you're always kind of just being like, doubting your ability to read the world in that way of what's wrong and what's right. So I think like, what's my advice to this guy is to just not keep it a secret.
Yeah. I wonder what that would be like to talk about, hey, when you go away, I'm just going to like totally devolve into, and like, I'm going to like that. I'm really looking forward to like relaxing and I'm going to get high. I'm going to order takeout. It's going to be great. Don't worry. The apartment will be clean when you get back.
Yeah. And it's his girlfriend, or spouse. So, it's just like, she should be, what's the response that he's expecting?
Yeah. Like she may not love that. I don't know.
She might not love it, but it is a forgivable offense, to just veg out on the couch every once in a while. That's a forgivable offense. And it's not, and it shouldn't have all of the weight that he's allowing it to have,
Yeah. I mean, the thing I've been thinking about with this question is, what does it mean to have a healthy vice versus an unhealthy vice?
Like, how can you tell the difference?
And like, I've talked about this on the podcast before when like I started feeling like my enjoyment of drinking had become an unhealthy vice.
Yeah.
I think it was what you were talking about of like, it wasn't just like TGIF kind of expectation. It was like TGI 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
And it was like, the insidious effect it had was that it was like, well, if it's 4 o'clock, I can't just be happy and enjoy myself.
Yep.
I have to wait until 5 so I can be
Exactly.
fucking happy.
Right.
And I think that's the thing that scares me about this kind of thing. And like a part of me is just like, bro, just forgive yourself. It's all good. You're having a fun time. Like you live a stressful life, whatever. But I worry that like, that if he's looking forward to it too much, and if it's taking him out of the moment,
man.
And if like that's what he thinks of as fun, he's like, I can't wait till the person I love more than anyone else in my life to get the fuck out of here, so that I can do this thing.
Right.
Then I worry about him.
The flip side. So on the one hand,
I've been that guy.
Yeah, that is a really good observation, man.
Yeah. On the one hand, it's like guilt can be really punishing and really unfair to us and limit us. And then on the other hand, guilt is like, it means you care about something fundamentally. It matters to you. And it means in some way, it means you have a good heart. Maybe it's not always like well served in that direction, but it's not so bad to feel guilt. It doesn't mean you have to listen to it. It's not bad to feel it.
Yeah, it's not bad to feel it. I mean, it's like this one psychiatrist who I interviewed told me, he's like, you feel guilty because you love.
Yeah.
You love those guys, and he feels guilty because he loves his girlfriend.
And maybe because, I don't know, he's got some pangs like, I need to take better care of myself. Maybe you're allowed to love yourself and maybe you're not. This isn't the way you want to treat yourself.
Yeah.
That's maybe a harder one to unravel, but he seems to have concerns about it. I'm a big believer personally. Like on the one hand, I believe in sobriety because I've seen it work for people. And sometimes you just need like that limit, but I'm more of a believer in harm reduction. Like that's the alternative to sobriety in substance abuse circles. Which is like, you really measure like, it's not the substance that's the problem. It's the harm it causes you and other people. Like that's what you really need to pay attention to. And right now, the worst that it's hurting him is his health a bit, like depending on what he's really putting into his body, you know?
But it's motivating him to, like, you know, when that little vacation is over, he's saying that he's, you know, doubles down on I think if I'm remembering correctly, on like the exercise and just being good, you know, the guilt can motivate you to do good. And I mean, I think like guilt is something I don't think we can ever get rid of. It's
hardwired into us. I think. Yeah.
And you can channel it. You can channel it for good. You know, there is no, like, it's not, I think, you know, you get at the end of your life. I know some people believe this, and it's like they're going to tally it up and be like, that's not how it works. You know, if you have the guilt, why not use it? You know,
I mean, guilt just means you have a conscience, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's all it is. It's like you think about the consequences of your actions, or you think about, you know, I mean, I guess, although it's different from the kind of guilt you talk about in your piece, where it wasn't really, you convince yourself it was the consequence of your actions when it wasn't, in fact, really the consequences of your actions. So sometimes there is guilt.
Right. That's when it doesn't work.
That's actually the kind of guilt that is probably not useful guilt, right?
Yeah. But, you know, and it's, everyone that I spoke to, people with survivor's guilt, you know, and psychiatrists and stuff like that, they say, like, you know, as far as we can tell, like, this is kind of like just your life from now on, you know, you'll never really get rid of that guilt. But, you know, you can learn how to manage it, and you can learn how to have a happy life. And that's, like, for me, what I wanted so badly with that essay is to reach people who had gotten to the point like me, where you're just like, why would I go to get help? Because what are they going to tell me?
Yeah.
You know, that God is fair, that life isn't short, you know, like, you know, so that's like, I wanted people who were thinking on that level, who had reached that level of depression, despair, to see, like, there is, like, a possibility, there is a way out of this.
Yeah.
And it's been done before. And I've heard from a lot of trauma survivors since I wrote that essay who've reassured me, you know, they're like, I'm happy. You know,
I just feel like there's this kind of, like, funny thing when you think about it, like, that people are so afraid, especially men are so afraid to get help. Like, when has seeking out help ever in the history of humanity, like, resulted in, like, fucking your life? Like, at the worst, I mean, the worst it could do is, like, it didn't really help that much, but, like, when has it ever, like, actually made your life way worse?
Okay, well, I'll give you a good example.
Give me one example.
Well, like, for example, like, I have worked with police officers who did not want me to give them a diagnosis or anything because they would not be able to hold down their job.
I see. Like, okay. So there's consequences of getting specific,
which is fucked
diagnoses.
Up. Yeah.
It is.
But I guess it just speaks to, like, so when has it not helped? When people don't understand, you know, when they can't really be helpful to you, when they don't really respect your pain, and respect what you're going through. That's when seeking help is dangerous.
And I jumped too far of a conclusion, but I was just thinking about, even, like, I mean, this is kind of, I mean, comparatively very trivial example, but like I've been having my 3-year-old son has been having a lot of difficulties. And my wife kept being like, read this book on how to deal with him better. And I kept being like, fuck that. I don't want, you know, cause I felt like this is an acknowledgement that I'm a shit father if I have to, like, read a book on how to be a good father. And then, of course, once I actually read the book, I'm like, oh shit, this is super helpful. I really see all of these ways in which this advice, has helped me. And, like, I can't believe I was resisting for that long. I could have been helped earlier. And it was just like this embarrassing feeling of, like, why was I so scared to, like,
really quick. Like, one thing I noticed in Iraq and Afghanistan is just, like, how tight these communities of people are. I mean, like, especially in Afghanistan, it's like, you know, you go into a village, you can kind of expect there to be kind of a general attitude of this village, you know, and, like, they have a lot of rituals. They believe in God, you know, they rise with the sun, you know, they don't stay up watching TV because they don't have TV. You know, I'm talking about in Zari district where I was, and, and there's this ritual of life and traditions and stuff like this. This is how you deal with this thing like that.
Mm-hmm.
You have a problematic 3-year-old son, or sorry, problematic's not the word, but like, so, sorry, but that's having trouble, right? That someone, the group's going to have a remedy for that. They're going to have a way that they've always dealt with that. And here in this country, we're left to figure out a lot of this stuff on our own, and we're getting information from all over the place. Yeah. And to bring this full circle for veterans, a lot of them are getting this information from Hollywood and from, politicians and lobbyists, these groups who are invested in the veteran being crazy. People benefit from that myth. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry, ending veteran suicide and these, and PTSD and all of this stuff. And so, like, I just wanted veterans to be like, you can look elsewhere for this information. You can, like, pick up a book and you can, do your research and find out. I mean, this is your life.
Yeah.
I'm just curious for you, when you say, like, guilt isn't something that just magically disappears one day, it's part of your life. Are you able to just see it kind of come up and say, oh yeah, there goes my guilt again? Are you ever able to do it like that? So it still kind of holds you captive whenever you feel it?
That's like something I wrestle with. How to convey what guilt feels like. Because it's not like I'm always just like feeling guilty, but I am guilty. In my mind, I'm guilty of something just terrible, and I live my life that way. And I constantly feel the need to atone and to redeem myself. And what I wanted to do is I lost my ability to do that when this shit ate me up and I couldn't write anymore, because that was my atonement. Because when I didn't want to be a journalist, but I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't want to be a journalist. And I decided to do that because I wanted to write journalism for the military and for veterans and for people who are actually there that would resonate and ring true with them. And I lost that ability to do that, because I had lost sight of that. And so, like, the guilt can consume you, and you can go down this really dark hole where you've just decided that you're not worth or, worthy of a happy life, or not even capable of having a happy life. Or you can try to redeem yourself. You can live a life of redemption. And that's an opportunity there, I mean, like,
when you talk about life of redemption, what do you mean by that? You're talking about the idea of losing your ego and kind of being a part of something bigger?
Yeah. And being a good person and living for other people and living for, a higher purpose and stuff. And like, I'm grateful to be on this podcast, and just like, because this is my redemption, and to be able to say these things in a public way, and to at least give, just like one person, like, to hear this podcast and it resonate with them. Like, and so when I'm doing this work, when I'm doing journalism, and, I do really deep dive stuff, and I've had so many moments that I was just like, where someone would call me to thank me for an article and stuff, and I just like bawl, and that's my life. And because financially it's really hard to continue this, right? And like I said, I've slept on like 7 different couches in the past 2 weeks, and it's uncomfortable, but like I'm happier because like I have to honor this thing. And I'm not saying everyone's got to become a writer who has survivor's guilt, but like find out what it is.
Yeah.
Like what can you get behind?
Yeah.
And it's better like that. life is better like that. You know, it keeps you moving. You know, it's better to move while you're above ground.
Yeah.
Don't just wallow in that shit.
Yeah.
So it seems like maybe for this guy, like just keep tabs on it and like, you know,
Like
start to notice whether it's like a vice that you have some control over. And if not, I think getting into some of the stuff Adam's talking about of like, you know, purposeful activities that I don't know, channeling whatever it is that this guy has that all of us have when we want to indulge in stuff that makes us feel like shit and that we're humiliated.
He's doing the right thing, right?
We have to hide.
Yeah.
He's reacting, I think, in a healthy way. Like, that's incredible. Good
for you.
I'll go to the gym like once. Yeah. You know, like after that, I mean, he's really
right. He doesn't really have a huge problem. It sounds like.
Yeah. He seems to have it. I mean, like, imagine
Only he
like,
knows, you know?
Yeah.
well, you know, a lot of people just do that their whole life. What he does, you know, like once every, you know, blue moon, like people just live their life that way everywhere, all the time, all across this country. People are just living that life.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Avi? I think if this guy were to come to you and
I think we agree. We agree that this is, in one sense, it's about guilt. Does he feel too guilty about this stuff? I think the antidote is either like, look, try out, what if you commit to this? If this is what you're doing, go in with both feet, you know? If this is how you want to spend your weekend, do it and enjoy it because that's why you're doing it. And if you don't enjoy it for some reason, then you can look at that, you know, and don't beat yourself up over it. If you're going to work out because you want to take care of your body, you know, like, so I think it's like, I think the idea of owning it, like you said, like, what if you told your girlfriend about it?
Yeah.
I think that's a cool thought experiment.
Actually, I'll just say the other night, Avi and I, we were at a party, a rare instance of hanging out outside of this podcast.
Yeah.
We were at a party together, and afterwards we went out to have dinner, and I just ordered a fucking giant plate of nachos that was like, and I literally ate the whole thing.
You did, yeah,
it was a giant like triple story thing of nachos. And usually when I do that, because I did feel like shit, and I also drank too much and I was hungover the next day.
Me too.
But I felt like shit. But what actually made me feel better about it, I texted my little brother, and I texted him the photo of the nachos, and I said, I just ate this. I just like pounded this entire plate of nachos to compensate for the Holocaust. And just saying that, just making a joke out of it, because you know it made it so that I didn't feel guilty about it anymore.
Yeah, man.
Like, you know?
That's it. It's like, you know, early on is this in, you know, him asking this question here, and now he's realized, okay, all three of us have done this as well.
Yeah,
and
like
I can
name
10 people off the top of my head who, you know, you're not alone. And I, early on in my research, this Vietnam veteran who's a good friend of mine, and I respect so much, he said, you just got to get with other combat vets sometimes. You got to be reminded, like, that there's other people dealing with this shit too. Yeah. And it will make it,
right. There's nothing wrong with you for having this problem or for struggling with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it makes it seem like it just eases the burden of it. You know, it doesn't feel like the universe is just bearing down on you.
Yeah.
Totally.
Adam, before we wrap, we usually ask our guest if they've ever been given a piece of advice that's meaningful to them, that still stays with them. And wondering what comes to mind for you.
Through the process of writing this, I realized like that I can be my own worst enemy, you know? And so I'm going to kind of sum up the advice that was being told to me constantly from every direction, in the way that I interpreted it, in the way when I understood it, I was able to kind of move forward. And it was like this, like I realized like perfectionism is the enemy or like the antithesis of courage. You have to do something knowing you will not get it right.
Yeah.
You will never get it right. You will never be a perfect person. You know, you're going to do this thing. Like when your girlfriend goes out of town, you're going to do that. Yeah. But you don't, you know, you could feel guilty about it and you can channel that, you know, but you don't have to condemn yourself for it. And and so when I started to really think about that on all different levels, and with my writing and just being like, it's a lesson that I learned in the Army, is that when I stopped being so up my own ass about, like, oh, I got to do this one little procedure right, and just being like, I could fail. It just got a lot easier, And when I first started writing, I applied that. And I had forgotten that. And it was just humble yourself before the task. It's way more, just like for me personally writing, it's so difficult. Like, of course, you're not nailing it.
Yeah.
Every draft you send in, like the editor's like, oh my God, this is amazing. But so people were kept coming to me with different versions of that advice throughout this, saying, stop being so hard on yourself, man. It's okay to like make mistakes, and that was it, and that was it for the guilt too.
Yeah.
Where can people find you on social media or find your writing?
I direct people to my website. It's just my name, adamlinehan.com. I mean, I have Twitter, and I'm like, I'm not super active on Twitter, and I've written a lot of stupid stuff. So, don't Google my name. Just go to the website, the curated.
Yeah. Sounds good. We'll send them there.
Right. Thanks so much, Adam.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, that's it for our show this week. As always, if you have a question, we kind of have the answers. You can email us at heymanpod@gmail.com, and we'll feature your question on the show. Better yet, leave us a voicemail, 917-426-4326. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter at heymanpod. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. And better yet, click that subscribe button. Thanks. Have a great week.